3 days after the fire, I thought the hardest question would be what I had lost. I was wrong. The harder question was what I would choose to rebuild. My daughter wanted me closer to her in Moncton. A designer could give me almost the same house again if I spent more and waited longer than my temporary housing would last. Then, a recovery worker I had never met returned one smoke-marked green box. Nothing inside was valuable, but it showed me, room by room, that the home I remembered was not the home I had actually been living in. At 61, I learned that a front door can still be standing after the home behind it is gone. 3 days after the fire, I stood at the end of my driveway in Fredericton and looked at the split-entry house where I had lived for 27 years. The roofline sagged over one side. Several windows were black. Water from the hoses had frozen in narrow ridges across the front steps. No one had been hurt. I repeated that sentence whenever my mind tried to count anything else. I had been at the school when the fire started, helping with late registration paperwork. I had worked in school offices for 28 years and had cut back to 3 days a week the previous spring. At work, problems came with names, dates, forms, and boxes that could be checked. A burned house did not. The recovery contractor had asked me to stay outside while the structure was assessed and debris was sorted, so I stood behind the marked boundary with my hands in my coat pockets. I was staying in a temporary rental across town with 2 suitcases, a borrowed kettle, and a toothbrush my daughter Leah had bought because I had forgotten mine. She had driven from Moncton the night of the fire and had been asking the same question ever since. "Why don't you come stay with us?" I had no answer yet. A man in a contractor's jacket came down the side of the property carrying a green plastic storage box. He was in his early 30s, with short black hair and mud on his work boots. He stopped before the boundary. "Miss Carver?" "Yes." "Mason Chen, debris sorting crew." He turned the box enough for me to see the side. Smoke had darkened the lid. Water staining ran along the bottom edge. A faded strip of tape was still stuck to the top. "House notes, Helen Carver." I had written those words years earlier. "You found that downstairs?" I asked. "Lower basement corner. Some metal shelving collapsed toward the wall and covered part of it. Was it opened?" "Only enough to check the contents was safe to handle. My supervisor logged it and cleared it for return. He handed me the recovery tag first, then the box. It was heavier than I expected. "It's not untouched," he said. "There's some water damage. That sounds more believable." He gave a small smile. "Probably is." There was no speech about miracles. No suggestion that he had rescued a treasure. Just a man doing his job carefully. I put the box in the back seat of my car and drove to the rental. Leah called while I was carrying it inside. I watched her name light up, then let it ring once before answering. "I'll call you back in 10 minutes. Are you okay?" I found something. I set the box on the small kitchen table. I released one latch, then the other. The first thing the fire gave back to me was a record of the house it had taken. The box remembered rooms I was already beginning to blur together. On top was a spiral notebook with a green cover. House book. Under it were printed photographs, room measurements, paint references, appliance model numbers, contractor cards, garden sketches, and folded receipts from repairs I had forgotten paying for. Nothing in the box could buy me another house. There was no cash, jewelry, insurance, cheque, or hidden document. It was 27 years of ordinary information. I had started the house book because I could never remember which off-white paint belonged to which room. Over time, it had become a record of almost everything I changed. Kitchen faucet replaced, living room floor refinished, front bedroom painted, garden fence repaired. I began scanning the pages that seemed useful and created a folder on my laptop called House Recovery. Then I made 2 backups, old office habits. By mid-afternoon, I had scanned almost 60 pages when I noticed something I had not expected. The photographs of the first spare bedroom were 8 years apart, then 6, then 3. The bedspread changed once. Almost nothing else did. The second bedroom had slowly become storage. Boxes, seasonal clothes, an ironing board, Christmas decorations. The formal dining room appeared in photographs from Leah's birthday, Christmas, and Thanksgiving, 3 occasions across several years. I spread the old floor plan across the table. The kitchen pages were worn from use. So were the living room notes. My own bedroom measurements had been updated twice. The small office had printer notes, shelving dimensions, and scribbled reminders. But 2 bedrooms and the dining room had barely been part of an ordinary week for years. I circled them in pencil. 27 years in one house had made every room feel necessary simply because it existed. The house book was telling me something less sentimental. Familiar was not the same as necessary. I called Mason using the number on the recovery tag because I wanted to confirm one detail. He explained again that the collapsed shelving had probably protected the box from some direct heat, not from water. So it survived because of where it happened to be? I asked. Mostly. Good? He sounded puzzled. Good? I don't need it to be a miracle. After we hung up, I looked at the 3 circles again. I had spent 3 days saying I wanted my house back. For the first time, I wondered which parts of it I actually meant. I had always assumed grief would make me cling to what survived. Instead, the records were asking whether clinging to the old layout would be another way of refusing to notice how my life had already changed. The next morning, Leah arrived from Moncton with coffee, 2 grocery bags, and 4 condo listings she had already printed. Leah thought the fire had answered a question I had never asked. She placed the listings beside my housebook. These are all within 20 minutes of us. Us meaning you, us meaning family. I looked at her. For how long are you planning my life? She sat back. That isn't fair. She was right, which irritated me more than if she had been wrong. Leah had driven nearly 2 hours the night of the fire. She had found the rental, bought groceries, replaced the toothbrush I forgot, and made calls when I could not remember who had already called me. Her concern had earned the right to be heard. It had not earned the right to decide. You're 61, Mum. I know my age. Then hear the rest. I don't want another emergency happening 2 hours away. Living closer to you would not have prevented this fire. I know. Then what are we talking about? She looked down at her coffee. Everything after. That answer slowed me down. I had heard accusation where she had meant fear. I need you to stop solving a question I haven't answered, I said. And I need you to stop acting as if every suggestion means I think you're helpless. We sat with that for a moment. Then I pulled the old floor plan toward us. Let me try something different. I showed her the 3 circled rooms. I don't know whether I should rebuild this house. I don't know whether I should buy something smaller. I don't know whether I should stay in Fredericton or move closer to you. Leah nodded once. Okay, but I'm not making a 20-year decision while I'm still reacting to the worst week of the last one. She looked at the circles. So what do you need? That was the first useful question either of us had asked all morning. I wrote 4 words on a sheet of paper. Cost, time, space, community. The adjuster's preliminary figures had given me a working range to plan around, but I still needed real construction numbers. My current rental was secure for 7 months. I needed to know how long a rebuild would take. I needed to know what space I actually used. And I needed to decide whether Fredericton was part of my present life or only part of my memory. That afternoon, I called Paula Boudreau, a residential designer who had been recommended during the early recovery process. I need 2 versions of the truth, I told her. What does it take to rebuild close to what I had, and what changes if I stop trying to copy it? Paula scheduled a meeting for Friday. Before Leah left, she stood at the rental door. My offer still stands. I know. You don't have to prove anything to me. I looked at the green box beside the wall. I'm beginning to think proving something might be the most expensive part. Friday morning, Paula turned the first reconstruction drawing toward me. It gave me almost exactly the house I had lost. For a few seconds, it felt like relief. Then she showed me what it would cost. The first rebuild plan gave me back every room I no longer used. Paula's drawing was close to my old 1,860 square foot split entry. 3 bedrooms, formal dining room, stairs through the center, kitchen in almost the same place. I traced the hallway with one finger. This looks right, because it is close to what you had, Paula said. I opened the housebook beside it. This bedroom was Leah's, and now, storage, mostly. The other spare room, guests a few times a year. Dining room, holidays. Paula did not tell me what that meant. She let me hear myself. I took out a red pen and marked the spaces I had actually depended on during an ordinary week. Kitchen, living room, primary bedroom, bathroom, small office, 5. The old house had roughly 8 functional spaces, depending on how we counted them. I had grieved all 8 as if I had lived in them equally. Then Paula opened the preliminary cost summary. The replica was about $68,000 above the ceiling I had set, after reviewing the adjuster's working figures and the amount I was prepared to contribute myself. I read the number twice. What changed? No single thing, she said. Labor, materials, site work, utilities, rebuilding the same square footage, several ordinary costs adding up. Timeline? 13 to 15 months is realistic at this stage. I would not promise the short end. My rental was secure for 7 months. Even if I approved the plan that day, I would still need another place to live for a significant gap. If I use cheaper finishes, it helps, but it does not solve the whole difference. Remove 1 bedroom. That changes the project more meaningfully. Dining room? Also meaningful. The familiar plan stopped looking comforting. It looked large, slow, and expensive. More important, it was answering a question I was no longer sure I wanted to ask. On the drive back to the rental, I called Leah from the parked car. The copy is $68,000 over my limit. Oh, and 13 to 15 months. That's longer than the rental. I know. She hesitated. So, Moncton? I almost snapped. Then I heard the word differently. Not as a verdict. As one option among several. Maybe, I said, but not because this plan scared me. Then why? Because I finally know what I'm comparing. The next morning, I called Paula. What happens if we design for the life I use now instead of the floor plan I had before? That changes the brief. Good. How much smaller are you thinking? I looked at the house book. Small enough that every room has a job. A week later, she showed me a 1-level concept around 1,260 square feet. 1 main bedroom, 1 flexible office and guest room, kitchen and living space together, no formal dining room, no split entry stairs. I wanted to love it immediately. Paula made sure I did not confuse liking the drawing with solving the problem. Smaller did not mean simple. Some costs dropped sharply in Paula's new estimate, others barely moved. Site cleanup still had to happen. Utilities still needed work. Professional services did not disappear because I removed a dining room. So smaller helps, I said. Yes. But the costs that exist before the walls go up are still there. Exactly. Instead of approving the plan, I decided to test the idea that smaller was automatically better. On Saturday, Leah came back to Fredericton, and we spent the morning looking at 3 modest existing homes that fit roughly the size range I was considering. The first was a townhouse with enough room but more stairs than my old split entry. I stood at the bottom holding the railing and pictured carrying groceries up them at 66. "No," I said. The second was a compact condo with 1 bedroom and a beautiful kitchen, but no practical place for the desk and printer I still used for schoolwork. The third was closer. 1 level, sensible rooms, low maintenance. Then I checked the bus route. It would take me away from the part of Fredericton where my doctor, school, friends, and usual Saturday walk already fit together. Leah watched me study the map. "You could change routines." "Of course I could, but I need to know whether I'm changing them because I want to or because the fire made every old routine feel negotiable." That afternoon, back at the rental, I wrote 2 questions on separate pages. How much house? Where is home? I had been treating them as one decision. They were not. The house book could help with the first. Only present-day life could answer the second. For the next week, I paid attention to what I actually did instead of what I imagined I needed. I worked at the small rental table. I cooked simple meals. I read in 1 chair by the window. I stored more than I used. I missed my garden, but I did not miss walking through an unused dining room to turn off a light. I missed the old spare bedroom when I remembered Leah sleeping there after her first year of university. I did not miss dusting it. By Friday, I had stopped thinking in square footage and started thinking in functions. I made 3 headings in the house book. Daily need. Occasional need. Memory only. The dining room went under memory only. 1 spare room went under occasional need, with a note beside it, must share another job. The kitchen, living area, bedroom, bathroom, and office function went under daily need. When Leah came the next day, I put the 3 pages in front of her. She read them twice. "You loved that dining room. I loved Christmas in that dining room." I tapped the page. "That is not the same thing." She looked at me for a long moment, and the argument between Fredericton and Moncton changed shape. The first thing I chose not to rebuild was a room I had loved. That made the decision feel more real than any cost estimate. Leah picked up the photograph of the old dining room, then set it back under memory only. "So this proves you should buy something smaller near me." "No." Her mouth tightened, then she caught herself. "Right." I did it again. "A little. I'm trying. So am I." I moved the daily need page between us. "This proves I need less house." It does not prove I need a different community. I listed what still existed in Fredericton after the fire. My job 3 days a week. My doctor. Friends I saw without scheduling 3 weeks ahead. The bus route. The neighborhood where people had brought soup and cardboard boxes before I had even learned how to ask for help. Leah was in Moncton. That mattered too. For the first time, neither of us tried to make one fact cancel the other. "I think I was turning distance into danger," she said. "After the fire?" "Yes." "Because you couldn't fix what happened." She nodded. "And if you live 20 minutes away, I could pretend I could fix whatever happened next." I had not expected her to say it that plainly. I may need more help someday. I know. But help and relocation are not the same decision. I know that now. That was not a dramatic reconciliation. She did not stop worrying about me. I did not promise never to be stubborn. We simply stopped using housing as a disguised argument about whether I was still capable of choosing for myself. Then Leah asked a better question. What would enough look like? I answered without looking at Paula's plan. 1 main bedroom, 1 flexible room that could be an office most days, and a guest room when Leah stayed. Kitchen and living together. A table big enough for four without a separate room, no daily stairs, storage that forced me to decide what deserved space. And where? She asked. That is the part I'm still testing. I called Paula and asked her to compare two realistic futures: buying a smaller existing home in Fredericton or rebuilding the one-level plan on my existing lot. She brought numbers, not opinions. An existing place would get me settled faster and reduce construction uncertainty. Rebuilding would preserve the neighborhood and give me a layout designed for the way I actually lived, but I would have to manage more months of temporary housing and more decisions. Neither option won everything. That was useful. The fire had trained my mind to look for total losses and total recoveries. Real choices were messier. Then Paula pointed to the timeline. Even the smaller rebuild would extend beyond my 7-month rental. Before you choose the lot, she said, solve the gap. It was the first practical problem I could not answer with a floor plan. The housing gap nearly made the faster option win. I called 2 furnished rental providers in Fredericton and 1 local property manager. A small furnished apartment would be available after my current rental ended, but the monthly cost was higher than I liked, and storage would be extra. 5 months there could consume money I wanted to keep as construction contingency. Leah listened while I explained the numbers. You could stay with me for free. I know. I'm not trying to move you permanently. I know that too. That was progress. I pictured commuting from Moncton to the school 3 days a week, leaving before winter daylight and returning after it. I could have stopped working. I could have taken a longer leave. But those choices would be consequences of the housing decision, and I did not want to pretend they were neutral. What if I stay with you some weekends and holidays, but keep a base here during the work week? I asked. Leah smiled. That sounds almost normal. I put a refundable hold on the furnished apartment. The act of doing it mattered. Rebuilding was no longer a fantasy that required every practical obstacle to disappear. I was accepting the cost of the choice before I made the choice. At the next meeting, Paula laid the 2 futures side by side. On the left, listings for smaller existing homes. On the right, the one-level rebuild. I made a comparison list. Timeline, monthly cost, maintenance, stairs, transportation, community, flexibility. The existing home won on speed, the rebuild won on layout and location. Leah pointed to the maintenance line. Think 5 years ahead. I have been. No, really. Picture yourself at 66. I looked at the one-level plan. Smaller yard, fewer rooms, no daily stairs. A flexible room instead of 2 bedrooms waiting for guests. I could picture carrying groceries inside. I could picture my desk near the window. Then I looked at the existing home listings. I could picture those too. Faster, cleaner, finished. But none of them were in the network of ordinary places I was still using. That was the distinction I had been afraid to trust. The neighborhood was not memory only. It was daily need. I slid the old 1,860 square foot plan away. Then I slid the existing home listings aside. Paula looked at me. Are you choosing the rebuild? I'm choosing this lot and this smaller brief, if the final numbers still fit my ceiling. She nodded. That is a direction, not final approval. Good. I have spent enough time confusing decisions with endings. The final design meeting was scheduled for the following week. For the first time, I was not asking anyone to restore what I had lost. I was asking whether the future I had chosen could actually be built. At the final meeting, the revised plan looked less like my old house than any drawing Paula had shown me. That was why it finally looked right. Approximately 1,260 square feet, 1 main bedroom, 1 flexible room, open kitchen and living space. No formal dining room, no split-level stairs. The updated estimate sat inside the ceiling I had set, with a contingency I was not willing to spend on decorative upgrades. It was not cheap, it was simply manageable. The temporary housing gap had an answer. The site work had an answer. Even my storage problem had an answer, though not one I enjoyed. Less, Paula said. That is still my recommendation. I know. She moved to the living area. Anything from the old room you want us to recreate? I opened the house book and took out one photograph. The old living room held a bookshelf, a lamp, a chair, nothing rare. Leah leaned closer. The bookshelf? Not the bookshelf. I pointed to the section of wall beside it. One shelf. Paula looked at me. For what? For this book. I put my hand on the green cover. That was the only thing I wanted deliberately copied from the old house, a place for the record of it. Not the room, not the furniture arrangement, not 27 years of walls. One reachable shelf. Paula marked the plan. Leah looked from the photograph to me. You're sure you don't want the new place to feel more like the old one? I want it to feel more like my life now. No one answered immediately. They did not need to. I signed the design authorization and initialed the pages that set the footprint. My hand did not shake. There was no surge of triumph. I felt decided. That was better. It was enough. A few weeks later, work began on the lot. Demolition gave way to site preparation. Site preparation gave way to forms, framing, inspections, and delays that were annoying rather than catastrophic. When my first rental ended, I moved into the furnished apartment I had reserved. I spent some weekends in Moncton, not because Leah had won an argument, but because I liked seeing her and because accepting a spare room for 2 nights no longer felt like surrendering my independence. Before I put the green box into storage, I opened it once more. The old floor plan was still inside. I folded it carefully and placed it beneath the house book. It no longer felt like instructions. It felt like history. 13 months after the fire, Leah followed me through the front door of the new house carrying 2 grocery bags while I carried the green box. The new house was not finished in the way magazines use that word. One cabinet door needed adjusting. The yard was mostly dirt. A length of baseboard in the flexible room still needed touch-up paint. But the heat worked, the front door locked, and every room already had a job. 1 main bedroom, 1 flexible room with my desk and a fold-out bed for Leah, kitchen and living space together, a table for 4 without a room of its own. No daily stairs, no empty bedroom waiting for a purpose I might never give it. I carried the green box to the shelf Paula had included and laughed. Leah stopped behind me. What? It's too high. She looked at the shelf, then at me. You designed an entire house around 1 shelf and forgot you're 5'4"? Do not enjoy this. I'm your daughter. I have responsibilities. The shelving was adjustable. We moved it down 1 level and set the box in place. That felt right. Over the next few months, ordinary life returned in ways I trusted more than dramatic ones. I kept working 3 days a week at the school. My doctor was still nearby. On Saturdays, I walked the same neighborhood route, though the new house changed which driveway I turned into. Leah visited. I visited her. We stopped measuring our relationship in kilometers. Sometimes I missed the old dining room at Christmas. Sometimes I remembered the spare bedroom before it became storage. Missing a room was different from needing it back. In early spring, our neighborhood association held a preparedness evening at the community center and asked me to speak for 10 minutes. I did not talk about insurance clauses or building codes. I brought the house book. I told people what had helped me. Keep useful household information organized. Back up what matters. Take ordinary photographs before you think you will need them. And write down details you assume you will remember forever. Then I added the thing I had learned only after the fire. If you ever have to rebuild, ask what you use now, not only what you lost. Afterward, a neighbor pointed to the green book. Was that what saved everything? No, I said. It helped me decide what did not need saving. That week, I sent a short note to Mason through his employer. Thank you for returning something I did not know I would need. Nothing more. He had done his job, the rest had been mine. That evening, I put the house book back inside the smoke-marked green box and placed it on the lower shelf. There was empty space beside it. In the old house, I would have filled that space because empty shelves had always looked unfinished to me. This time, I left it empty on purpose.